Hey everyone, Nathan here, Absurd Being. So today we're going to look at the knowledge argument, also known as Mary's Room. And so this is an argument which was put forward by Frank Jackson way back in 1982 in a paper called, or an article called Epiphenomenal Qualia. And in this video we're just going to look at what the argument is, and check some of the conclusions that follow from it, and then I'll kind of give my own take a little bit on what I think where we should kind of direct our attention to look at consciousness as in a way as a result of Mary's Room. So yeah, Frank Jackson is the guy. Funnily enough, and this knocked me totally out when I first heard it, Jackson himself disagrees now with his conclusions in this 1982 article. So the argument is really good, really simple, and really powerful. And so he held it, he put it forward, believed it for 20 odd years, and then did a 180 and doesn't think that the argument does what he claimed it did back in 1982. So that's really really interesting. I won't look at exactly why Jackson changed his mind. We'll just look at the argument and some of the consequences. So anyway, let's get into it with the argument first. So the argument's nice and simple. Mary is a scientist. She knows everything. She knows all of the physical facts about color, but she is in, and she's been, however, it's a thought experiment. We can manipulate reality any way we like. She's been in this black and white room. She's never seen color. She's lived her whole life, I guess, in this black and white room, but she's studied everything there is to know about color. So she knows all of the physical facts. She knows what the different frequencies of electromagnetic radiation that produce changes in the brain, and how those changes take place, and what they she knows all of the neurophysiology, all of the physical facts she understands. And the question is, but she's never seen color, but she knows all of the physical facts around color that surround how we perceive color. So the question is, when she leaves the room and actually sees color for the first time, does she learn anything new? Does anything get added to her knowledge, the complete physical knowledge that she already has of color and color perception, and the way that the brain changes when it sees color. And what Jackson argued for, is that she does learn something new, despite the fact that she knows all of the physical facts surrounding color perception. When she leaves the room and actually sees color for the first time, she learns something new. And that tells us then that there's more to the world than just the physical facts, the physical information. So a complete description of the world is not the same as a complete description of the physical facts. There's something more. And that something will be experiential, will be part of experience, what it is to experience something. So essentially, physicalism is false. That's the conclusion. It's a really great thought experiment, really succinct, and quite powerful, I think. I think it makes intuitive sense that even though Mary knows everything there is to know about color and vision and the brain, and the physics behind, or the physics, she still doesn't have access to everything that there is to know. She's still missing something in her picture, and that something can only be filled in by an actual experience of color. So let's have a look at the conclusion in a bit more detail. So like I said, the conclusion is that physicalism is false. And there are different terms that we can use here: physicalism, naturalism, materialism, physical naturalism. There's heaps of, and I don't want to get caught up in all of these terms and what they might mean and how different people define them. Essentially, physicalism as the belief that the physical is all there is and the physical facts are all there are. That brand of physicalism, kind of a strict physicalism, is absolutely refuted by the knowledge argument, I think, because there are also experiential facts that don't fall into this purely physical description. There are, another way to put this, I guess, there are first person facts that are different from third person facts. So knowing something kind of from the inside is different from knowing it from the outside, from a complete external description of it. And so I think that's pretty solid. It's the knowledge argument, despite what Frank Jackson himself now says, the knowledge argument rules out this kind of physicalism. So that leaves us with a couple of other options then. First is substance dualism. So here we can just say there are two substances, mind and matter, and you need an account of both of these in order to describe everything that there is. So this is just Cartesianism, right? This is not refuted by the knowledge argument. And the other option is substance monism. So we could say that there's only one substance, whether it's mind or whether it's matter, and the other arises from the first in some way. And therefore a complete description would still have to include that other whatever it is. So if our monism was matter is all there is, there is a special configuration of matter that yields these experiences, these first-person experiences, which have to be included in any complete account of reality, even though they're not fundamental, even though that experience is, in a way, it gets its, it borrows its ontology from matter, because matter is the only thing that there is. We still have to, it's still not matter itself. It emerges in some way from matter. So a complete account of reality would have to include it, and vice versa is true. So if we say that consciousness is all there is, then matter somehow arises from that, and it's not going to be enough to just give a description of consciousness. We also have to talk about this special configuration or special metamorphosis that consciousness undergoes under special circumstances in which matter arises. So either way, a simple description of one won't account for everything. We have to include these special circumstances, but there's only one substance. So substance dualism, substance monism. These are the two options, and the knowledge argument doesn't support either. That's an important point here. So Mary's Room doesn't tell us which one of these is more likely or more plausible. It has nothing to say on this. All it does is eliminate that strict physicalism that we talked about. We know that there has to be more to the picture than just physical facts. So that's clear. The problem with this, as we are now, is that both of these, I think, are unsatisfactory. Substance dualism and substance monism, neither of them work for me. So substance dualism, there's there's Cartesianism. I think there's a fairly solid knockdown argument for this one, and it's the interaction problem. How can, if you've got these two completely separate substances, how can they relate to each other? How can mind influence matter? How can my consciousness move my body? In what way is there any overlap between these two? And I think that there's no way to satisfactorily answer that. So the interaction problem, I think, kills substance dualism. And that leaves us with substance monism. And there are two forms of this. So you could have either realism, where matter is the only substance. But then you have to explain how consciousness emerges from that. And that's the drive at the moment. That's what all of neuroscience is about, and much philosophy of mind is about as well, trying to explain how mind emerges from matter. And this seems a dead end to me. I don't see any way that you can get any traction on this problem if you start with just matter and try and get mind out of it. I don't think that's going to work. And idealism is the other form of substance monism. And this one, so consciousness is all there is. Right? That mind is going to be our soul substance. But then you've just got the reverse problem. How do you get matter out of that? How do we get these objects that appear to be material? How do they arise out of something that's fundamentally immaterial? And again, I don't see any way you can do that without just making it a kind of a brute statement. If consciousness is in this particular form, then you get matter, or perhaps it's all an illusion. It's all just, or it's all happening in this great mind. We're all like dream characters in this. But I mean, this is all just fantasy, right? There's nothing solidly philosophical about this kind of reality. This is religion, essentially, by a different name. So both of those have I think serious problems, which means, like I say, neither of the alternatives that appear after Mary's room does its job, neither of them seem particularly appealing. So we have to go beyond these conclusions, and that's where we're going now. So like I said before, all the knowledge argument does is refute physicalism, that strict physicalism. The two options that were on the table aren't that appealing, so where are we going to go now? So I think we have to look at experience. We have to go back. We're going to have to rethink consciousness, rethink the mind, because the way that we're thinking about it now just lands us in a whole mass of problems, which, as I've said many times, I think are intractable. So let's go right back to the board. What is experience? And this has kind of been answered or there are two features of the way we tend to think about first-person experience that I think we need to move beyond. They're problems and they're obstacles for us when it comes to understanding mind or consciousness. And the first of these is qualia. So the qualia, the basic idea here is that just sensation is not enough. in addition to the sensation, there also has to be this extra phenomenal something tagging along, a mysterious feeling that it's like to X, feeling that it's like to experience red, feeling that it's like to taste saltiness. So there's always, along with the sensation or the thought, the idea, there is this extra feeling, this phenomenal character that gives this brute sensation or thought or idea, that gives it some phenomenal character. And that's what qualia are. And when we reflect on our past experiences, I think qualia do seem plausible. It seems like there is an extra sense, an extra something it's like to experience things when we think about our past experience. And this is a problem, because what it does, I think, is reify consciousness. This is kind of my new word, reifying consciousness. And what I mean when I say that qualia reifies consciousness is that it turns consciousness into a thing, something underneath or behind experience in some way. So it's no longer enough to just have the experience. There also has to be this extra thing underneath. And this is what I mean. We've reified consciousness. We've turned it into something solid behind the experience itself, behind the sensation of seeing red. There's this extra thing in the background, which is the phenomenal character, the qualia. And basically, this is nothing more, nothing less than Cartesianism, Cartesian dualism, right? If you imagine that in addition to the experience, you have this felt sense, this sense that it is like something to do whatever it is you're doing. How is that not just a Cartesian mind? And the thing is, though, anyone who subscribes to this belief in qualia will swear black and blue that they're not into Cartesianism, that they don't buy Cartesianism. This is not a Cartesian mind, they'll say. But it looks like a Cartesian mind, it acts like a Cartesian mind, and it's evident the way that you talk about this, these qualia lurking in the background, they function like a Cartesian mind. Sure, not a mind that's a substance, not a mind that's fixed or immutable in some way, but a little core, a solid core that accompanies every experience. I mean, that you can't get any closer to a Cartesian mind than that. So the denial that I think here that this is not Cartesianism, I don't think it really stacks up. And the bigger problem when we do this, when we reify consciousness in this way, when we just go back to Cartesianism, perhaps a slightly modified form of Cartesianism, but Cartesianism nonetheless, when we reify consciousness in this way, that it's this nebulous feeling that it's like to experience something, it's so hazy, it's so unclear that we guarantee that it can't be explained. There's just no way to explain this, because the whole thing, what we're calling consciousness, wrapped up in these qualia, it's so nebulous already. There's just no way to account for it in any meaningful way. And that's exactly what David Chalmers has already told us. That's why he calls it the hard problem. And in actual fact, it's not just hard, it's impossible. It's the impossible problem, because the way it's set up, the way we're thinking about it, it's absolutely impossible to explain. There's just no explanation I could give that would satisfy someone who believes that consciousness is somehow associated with or comprised of this mysterious, ineffable qualia that accompany all of our sensations. And so that means that there are only two options. You either just speculate anything you like, because all options, no matter how crazy, are on the table now, because no explanation's ever going to work, so you can just believe whatever you want. Or you have to presuppose consciousness. You just have to say, we don't know what it is, but I know that I have it, so it must be a part of the universe in some way. Let's just throw it in there. And I'll talk about those kinds of theories a little bit later. But so that's the problem with qualia. And like I said, when we reflect on past experiences, qualia seem valid. They seem legitimate. Like that, yes, when I think about that experience when I was looking at that flower, it wasn't just that I was seeing red, but there was also this feeling that it was like something to see red. And seeing that feeling of seeing red was different from the feeling of seeing blue. So there is this qualitative aspect, dimension to experience, which needs an explanation. That it seems plausible, it seems legitimate. However, I think if we actually manage to think about our past experiences as we felt them at the time, as we experienced them at the time, I think qualia seem less plausible. And so think about a conversation that you had in the past, and really try and put yourself back in the moment. So you're listening to the words that the person you're talking to is saying. You're formulating your response. You're completely engaged in the conversation, completely immersed in it. That's what it is to have a conversation, right? That's what it is to do anything, in fact. Originally, authentically, is to be completely immersed in it. And when you are, I think if you've done that exercise correctly, you'll see that there is no extra feeling accompanying the conversation. You're so caught up in the conversation that there is nothing else going on. There is no feeling that it's like to have the conversation tagging along. That is, I think, a fiction that we project into the experience when we reflect on it, when we think about it after it's finished. And like I said before, when we do reflect on it, it does seem plausible. Yeah, it did feel like something. But I think if we can really recapture that moment as the conversation was going on, I don't think it did feel like anything. There wasn't anything extra lurking in the background to the experience. I was just completely absorbed by, immersed in the conversation. And so qualia aren't in our lived, in the moment experiences. And there's a simple reason for that, because I am not my qualia. I am not this extra something in addition to what's happening, in addition to what's going on. I am the experience itself. When I'm having that conversation, I am that conversation. There is nothing extra. There is nothing over and above the conversation going on that I need to explain. I am not this Cartesian mind lurking anywhere behind the actual experience, behind the conversation. That's the first thing that we have to let go of. And like I say, Qualia essentially are a Cartesian mind. And as long as we hold on to that, as long as we demand that we explain this extra thing that's over and above our experiences, we'll never be able to do it. We'll always come up short, and that's because we just haven't moved past Cartesianism. But the problem is we think we have. We think we've gone beyond Cartesianism. No one believes in Cartesianism anymore, but we do, just by a different name. It's just Qualia. We've replaced it. And we've deluded ourselves into thinking that this is something different, when in fact it's exactly the same. We're still postulating that I, the real I, if you like, is lurking in the background of, or behind my experiences. So I am that conversation. There's nothing more going on. And we can generalize this. We can, if we expand on this idea, we see that if we're going to explain consciousness, if we're going to get to any real understanding of what our minds are, it's not just that I am the experience that's happening to me, or that I am that conversation, but in a deep sense, I am in the universe, in reality itself. I'm not this little partitioned off segment of the universe, which is operating in addition to the other things that are going on in the universe. I have to be fully open and immersed in the universe in order for us to explain consciousness, in order for us to really get to an understanding of what consciousness is. And this leads me to the second obstacle I think we have to overcome, and it's the obstacle of inner experience. So we believe that our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, our perceptions, everything that happens in our minds is happening inside some kind of mental space, right? That word inner, inside, that's the key term. That's the key way we think about our consciousnesses, as something that is kind of partitioned off. Like I said before, we're in the universe, sure, but I'm kind of separate from it. I'm locked away in this inner realm which no one else has access to. That, thinking like that, is another kind of reification, but this time we're reifying inner experience. So we're taking this notion that there's an internal, and we're creating a thing out of it. We're making it into something. When in actual fact, it doesn't exist. There is no inner realm separate from an external realm. And this, again, you'll notice, is pure and simple Cartesianism. Now we're talking about the Cartesian theatre, right? The belief that my thoughts are happening for me inside, in my mind, which is in some way separate from extended reality. It's basically the definition of the Cartesian theatre. And yet we think we've moved beyond Cartesianism. No one believes in a Cartesian mind anymore. Cartesian theatre? No. But that is the very definition of the Cartesian theatre. And it's a myth. It's a fiction. So every time we entertain this notion, we're starting in the wrong direction. We're starting the race running in the opposite direction. And so we just have no chance of explaining this. And this is what I said next. It's unsolvable, this problem. If we assume that the mental is an inner realm, somehow separate from everything going on in the extended world, it's unsolvable. This is just another it's another take on the hard problem. It's another dimension to the hard problem, which, as I said, is actually the impossible problem. Because once you set this up, there's no explaining it. There is no way to explain this. Mental activity, perceptions, thoughts, beliefs, all of these things have to be external. They have to be out there in the universe. They can't be locked away in some kind of mental space, mental internal sphere, which is locked off from the outside. But let me stop you here, because as soon as I say that mental activity is external, I guarantee I'm creating, there's a tendency there to now jump into religion and mysticism and the supernatural, and our mind is outside our bodies. We're actually, and if we meditate hard enough, or if I concentrate hard enough, do the right exercises, I can transcend my body. I can know the universe from beyond this point of view that is my body. Definitely not. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. The mental activity is external, but this has in no way does this suggest that we can transcend the physical and have access to another dimension or none of that stuff. That is totally not where I'm going with this. When I say mental activity is external, all I mean is that there is no barrier. There is nothing separating my thoughts from everything else that's going on in the universe. The universe has to be such that my thoughts can arise within it. And they'll still be locked into my perspective, of course. How else? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to say anything otherwise. To suggest otherwise is pure speculation. It's nothing more than religion to suggest that I can somehow transcend my point of view, whatever that could even possibly mean. When I say mental activity is external, it just means that it's happening in the universe. When I perceive something, I'm not perceiving something in my mind somewhere. That doesn't make any sense. I'm perceiving the thing in the universe, out there, in reality. There isn't some locked away corner of the universe where my mind is calculating, is perceiving, is thinking. That is completely impossible to explain, and it doesn't accurately reflect, I think, what the conclusion that we come to if we genuinely think about consciousness. So, okay, I've drifted off quite a bit on that. It's not mystical. Mental activity is external. Why do I say that? Simply because there is nowhere else for it to be. Mental activity has to be open and in the universe because there's nowhere else for it to be. To suggest otherwise is to create a little entity. It's just manufacturing something that we don't need in order to explain consciousness. It's following that same route that Descartes took because it seemed plausible, and it still seems plausible. But if we drill down and really think clearly on this, I think we'll realize that there is no inner realm, and postulating it is immediately creating a mystery. an unsolvable one. And the clearest case, I think, here, thoughts are a little bit tougher to explain, although I think they can be explained. But the clearest case is perception, and I've talked about this quite a lot with my Bergson series. Perception. When I look at something, I'm not creating an internal representation of it, as if when I look at a pen, now there's the real pen and the imagined pen that I have in my mind. Why create an extra entity in the world? Well, why? It doesn't explain anything, and it just makes it impossible to explain consciousness. Isn't it simpler to say that when I see the pen, I'm seeing the pen exactly as it is, not in my head, but out there in the world? There's only one pen, and it's out there in the world. There isn't another pen anywhere else in my mind, whatever that. And as I'm saying it now, there's a pen in my mind. It doesn't even make sense, right? The words just don't seem to refer to anything except a mystery, which is exactly what consciousness is for us. It's a complete mystery. So when I see the pen, I'm seeing it in the world, out there, extended where it is. Why? There's nowhere else for it to be. But again, that doesn't mean that I can transfer my perception from my body to the pen, see the world from the perspective of the pen. That's crazy. That's ridiculous. That's then going off on a whole tangent, which we don't need to go down. Fine if you want to go there, but this I want to keep this grounded in kind of rigorous philosophy, not branch out into metaphysical speculation. To say that when I see the pen, I'm seeing the pen as it is out there. In a sense, my mind is out there in reality because there's nowhere else for it to be. But that, like I say, that doesn't mean that I'm seeing the world from the perspective of the pen, or my mind is connecting to the pen in some strange way. That's definitely not what this is about. Oh yeah, and that's a good point actually. To say that, to think that when I see the pen, actually everything's open. There is no kind of, it's not locked away. My mind is not locked away. When I see the pen, my mind is out there in the world. To then jump from that to think that therefore I can expand my consciousness to see the universe from the perspective of the universe, to be the universe, that is still Cartesian dualism. That's still Cartesianism, because you're still imagining you're in the Cartesian theatre. You're just imagining now you've got the key to the door and you can go outside whenever you want, but you'll come back to the Cartesian theatre when you're done. So that's still, it doesn't get you away from Cartesianism. It just like I say, it kind of creates a back door which lets you indulge these kinds of superstitious beliefs, but totally that's going well beyond what I'm suggesting here. So let me see if I can wrap this up in some way that makes sense. If we resist the tendency to reify lived experience, to reify consciousness, then there's a third option here after we rule out those two, substance dualism and substance monism. So this would then be a bolder metaphysics that truly does go beyond Cartesianism, but at the same time doesn't lose touch with solid, rigorous philosophical thought, which should always be our grounding. We should always have that as our support. If we don't, then, like I was saying before, the rails are off and everything's on the table. We're into the realm of religion and superstition. So we have to maintain a rigorous thought, but we can still go beyond Cartesianism here. And this metaphysics won't simply presuppose consciousness. It will explain not so much consciousness first. First, it will explain what the universe is, such that awareness, thought, perception can occur within it. It will explain the universe such that experience can arise within it, not as this add-on, not as this something extra that we have to affix with duct tape and super glue, but it will arise. It will explain the universe such that it arises naturally from the universe, from the way that we understand, we see the universe. And we have to be careful of this because a lot of the ways that, or often the way people try and overcome this problem of consciousness is precisely to presuppose it. And that's exactly what panpsychism does, for example. We can't explain it. Let's just throw it into matter. It's just there in our fundamental presuppositions. That's why I call these theories ground floor theories of consciousness. They don't explain anything. They don't explain consciousness. They just throw it in at the ground floor level of our explanation. So it's just already there. Another one that does the same, I think, is idealism, which of the Castrupian variety, I think. There's no explanation here. It's just we've got the little mystery of local minds. We don't know how to explain it. Let's just make a big mystery, a universal mind. And the little minds now can just pop up inside it somehow. And again, somehow, there's no explanation there. There's no explanation of the universal mind. There's no account of what it is or what it's like. There's no explanation of how you get the little minds within it. It's all just, we're just totally begging the question, right? Just presupposing consciousness and then not drilling too deep, not asking too many questions about it, because in actual fact we haven't explained anything. And so the metaphysics that I'm talking about here, this bolder metaphysics that goes beyond Cartesianism, that doesn't presuppose consciousness, can be summed up, I think, in two words: Henri Bergson. I can't hide my my affiliations, my respect for this guy, for this philosopher. He has just such a solid account, I think, of metaphysics, and I really think that he's done exactly what I've talked about here. He's overcome Cartesianism completely, I think, and he's offered. Not that I've seen all the theories out there, not that I'm an expert on this at all, but for me, this is the only theory of consciousness which actually explains consciousness, which doesn't just defer it, which doesn't just say, well, when you get matter in this particular arrangement, then consciousness emerges from it in some magical way. Or just says, boom, let's just throw consciousness in there at the start. He actually derives, he gives a mechanism for consciousness, and which we are going to have to hit a brick wall at some stage. It can't be explanations all the way down. We have to come up against some bedrock which we can't explain by way of something else, because it's fundamental. But we can do better, I think, than just saying that fundamental thing is consciousness, because, like I say, it just doesn't explain anything. So, back to the knowledge argument. Mary learns something new when she sees red. I think that's definitely true. But we need to reimagine what Mary is, and we need to reimagine what the universe is, such that Mary as a conscious subject can occur within it. And that's my take on the knowledge argument. Let's hit a summary. So the knowledge argument, basically the conclusion from this is that eliminative physicalism is false. The physical facts cannot be a complete description of all of the facts. And that leaves us with two other options, substance dualism and substance monism. Neither of these, I believe, are the right way to go. And in order to get to this right path, I think we have to revisit lived experience. We have to go right back and rethink our position on this. Because at the moment, all we've got, I think, is Cartesianism in a different guise. So if we go back to lived experience, we see that I believe there are no qualia. Qualia are just an intellectual projection into our experience after the fact. And furthermore, there is also no inner realm. The mind is extended because there's nowhere else for it to be. The mind is in the universe because there's nowhere else for it to be. There is no inner Cartesian theatre. And all of this, if we follow this correctly, I think we get to a third option, and that is basically Henri Bergson's metaphysics. So, yeah, like I say, I've fully, my cards are completely on the table. I'm a Bergsonian all the way. I just think that guy totally nailed it when he was talking about this. He explains everything. He has a take on metaphysics which doesn't so much explain the problems, which is what we're trying to do now. We've got these problems and we're trying to explain them. He reframes the whole thing in such a way that the problems just dissolve. We see them for what they really are, which is to say they are the consequences of not thinking about consciousness or the universe or metaphysics correctly. When we do that, it's smooth sailing. Cool. So that's it for me and the knowledge argument. And as always, I always end up back at Henri Bergson. It seems like that's all of everything I write these days. There's like a connecting thread somewhere back to Bergson. I just can't get away from him. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.